All right, today we're digging into this really fascinating system from the ancient world. It's a blueprint, not just for how to feed a nation, but for how to build a just and equal society, all through this simple act of celebration.
But first, let me ask you something. What's the one meal that tells your family's story? Is it a special recipe for the holidays? Your grandma's secret sauce? Just think about that for a second. Because that deep connection between food and memory and who we are, well, ancient societies got that. They understood it incredibly well.
And that brings us right here. This quote from Dr. Cynthia Parker is pretty much the key to the whole thing. The idea that food isn't just food, it's a container of memories, is what unlocks this entire 3,000-year-old guide for building a nation, right there in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, so it's not like national feasts were some brand new invention. I mean, Israel's neighbors, they threw massive parties too. But, and this is a really big but, the whole point behind them was worlds apart. See, most ancient feasts were basically the king's personal marketing campaign. It was all about flexing, showing off how rich and powerful he was. And the guest list? It was basically a who's who for networking and making deals. But Israel's feasts? Totally different vibe. The entire point was to tell a story, a national story about freedom, and to hammer home the idea that everyone, and I mean everyone, had a place there. So, how'd they pull that off? Well, it wasn't just some random holidays they stuck on a calendar. No, this was brilliant. They actually wove the whole system into the natural seasons, into the rhythm of the harvest, turning the act of farming itself into, well, a living history lesson. And you can see how it all works right here. 3 times a year, like clockwork, the entire nation would literally just stop. Everyone would stop working and come together for one of these huge festivals, and each one was perfectly timed with a specific harvest. It's such an elegant system, right? So when the barley was ready in the spring, boom, that was the physical trigger to remember their escape from slavery during Passover. Then the wheat harvest comes in, time to celebrate the gift of the land itself. And that last big harvest of olives and grapes, that was all about remembering how God provided for them when they were wandering in the wilderness. The food itself became the prompt for the memory. Okay, so the whole nation is supposed to show up. But who exactly does that mean? Who actually got an invitation? And let me tell you, the answer was, for its time, just jaw-droppingly radical. I mean, just look at this list. The law made it crystal clear, everybody comes. Not just the big-shot landowners and their families. We're talking their servants, the local religious leaders, and then there's this, the most crucial part, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. The most marginalized people in society were explicitly on the guest list. But of course, there's a catch, and it's a big one. This incredible, all-inclusive invitation came with a rule. You can't show up empty-handed. Everyone, and I mean everyone, had to bring an offering from their harvest. And, well, you can probably see the pretty significant problem this creates, right? Yeah, exactly. If you're an immigrant, or an orphan, or a widow, you probably don't own any land. You don't have a harvest. So what on earth are you supposed to bring? It feels like you're invited to the party, but whoops, you can't actually meet the main requirement to get in. It seems like a major flaw in the system. But the answer wasn't some kind of loophole or a special exception for the poor. It was so much smarter, so much more elegant than that. They built the solution right into the economic system of the nation. It was this incredible design that wasn't just about charity, it was about dignity. And that solution has a name, gleaning. You find these laws in Deuteronomy, and they basically commanded landowners to be, well, kind of bad at harvesting, on purpose. And again, this isn't just a command to be nice to the poor. This was a system designed to enable participation for everyone. So here's how it worked. A landowner goes through their field to harvest their crops, right? But the law says you can't go back for a second pass. You're forbidden from picking the field totally clean. Whatever you miss, whatever you drop, you have to leave it. And that leftover bit, that wasn't charity. It was legally the harvest for the poor. It was their right to go in and gather it for themselves. And the results of all this, they now show up to the national feast, not with their handout, but with their own contribution. They're not charity cases, they are full-fledged participants. And that is the absolute genius of it. Suddenly, the harvest becomes that powerful memory trigger for everyone. It doesn't matter if you own 100 acres or if you're a widow gathering from the edges of someone else's field. The act of bringing in that grain reminds you of God's provision and that you have a real, tangible part in this huge national story.
Okay, so let's pull the camera back for the big picture. What does all of this, the feasts, the harvests, this built-in system of generosity, what does it all add up to? What was it actually building?
Well, 3 times every single year, this entire system did 3 really crucial things that helped forge a unified national identity. First, it was like a national rehearsal of their most important story, making sure nobody ever forgot where they came from. Second, it literally brought people together from all over the country, physically reminding them, hey, we're all in this together, we are one people. And third, and this might be the most powerful part, it leveled the playing field. For those few days, it didn't matter what your local status was. Everyone gathered as equals, celebrating the exact same story. And really, that's the heart of the whole thing. It comes back to this idea from Dr. Parker. The feasts were basically a huge declaration that God is the real host of the party. He's the one providing for everybody, and he's the one inviting everyone, rich, poor, powerful, vulnerable, to sit together at his table as equals. So, this ancient blueprint kind of leaves us with a challenge, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, what are the defining stories that we rehearse over and over in our own communities? And maybe more importantly, when we tell them, who actually gets a seat at the table? And are we doing enough to make sure they can show up not just as guests, but as full participants?